by being honest. 3 months ago, I did not expect to find myself on a stage like this. At least, not so soon. When the topic of doing this talk first came up, I thought, wow, that sounds pretty cool, but that's not going to happen in my dreams. What would I even talk about? Never mind standing up on a stage in front of people. So I went to tell this to my boyfriend, and do you know what he said to me? In a blink of an eye, he turned to me and he said, well, if you won't do it, I will. Now, that was not the response I was expecting. But it turns out it was the response I needed. I realized that I was standing in my own way. And I fired back, no way, I was asked. So, in the spirit of the topic of my talk today, I'm up here to stand behind two of my fundamental values: integrity, to believe in myself and my ideas, and courage to share them with you. I believe that if we align our professional selves with our fundamental values, we can all live a more sustainably and fulfilling life. So I think we have a mixture of people in the audience here today. Some of you might not have really thought much about your professional selves yet, whilst others will be somewhere further along your career path by now. Either way, at some point, we all figure out how to make a living. And I'd like you to take this idea into consideration whilst you do. So let me start off by letting you in on a little secret. The first lesson I learned when I went into the 9-to-5 working world was that nobody actually knows what they're doing. You see, when you're on a fixed rate paid per hour for the time you work, rather than the outcome of your productivity, it's much more about how you do things rather than what you do. This is the first scale I'd like to take a look at today. This is quite different, I find, to our academic lives. In academia, our success is based on the output and quality of our work. Yet, this work and the grades we're given, we're encouraged to make the basis of our career decisions. The education system attempts to set us up to figure out what we're good at and where we can apply that to the global economy. Except, I don't feel like this works so well. At least, in my experience, it didn't prepare me for securing my first job, never mind working in it. I'd like to share this experience with you. When I was younger, I heard the saying that if you do a job you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. And I was quite determined to keep this notion with me when I was choosing my A-levels, whilst my dad, being sensible, encouraged me to consider good career prospects. So we settled on working towards marketing. It was more vocational than advertising, but still creative. And I'd always been graded well in creative subjects. Alongside media and psychology A-levels, I did end up choosing biology and geography. In a plot twist, my GCSE results had told me that I was actually good at some science after all, and it was looked upon favorably to choose at least 2 facilitating subjects. Secretly, I did love the idea of becoming a marine biologist, but that wasn't considered a realistic career prospect for me. I was the creative one, whilst my twin brother was the scientific one. Ultimately, what I was great at best at won, and I went to uni to do marketing, sneaking a bit of advertising in there too. So, coming along to when I was offered my first job offer for my placement year, although I didn't realize it at the time, it wasn't so much as what I did that interested the recruiters, but how I did things. I realized that although they said they'd expressed interest in a more creative and brand marketing role, the way I performed in the assessment center, they thought I actually was more well-suited for a strategic and analytical role. Me? Analytical? No one had ever said that to me before. Accepting the offer, I continued to be thrown off by what academia had told me I was good at. Actually wasn't all that useful in the workplace. Instead, I learned on the job how to do things. And what I did varied from person to person, realizing that over time, this is the case company to company too. It doesn't matter as much as what you do, but your approach to work, your attitudes and behavior, not producing a standard quality of output. So, whilst I realized academia focused more on what you do, in the workplace, it was more about how you are and how you were. I realized that this is quite different to how often we're taught from academia. And it got me thinking, how do we know what kind of career path we want to do when we have little to no experience being professionals? I started to become more and more conscious about how I was and who I was. And I realized that I didn't really know who I was or who I wanted to be yet. I liken it now to someone who doesn't know how to drive, and they've hijacked a car, and they realize they have no clue how to drive. Shit, now I've taken over, what do I do? But also, that's no excuse not to take the wheel. If instead we just sit looking out the window, letting somebody else drive us around as we try to give them some directions and then brace ourselves. Because imagine, they start to waste the fuel, they're exhausting their pipes, and they're wearing out the tires, and they're running the lights. They won't stop to do any maintenance or consider another mode of transport. And they're driving straight towards the cliff. I realized that I didn't really enjoy the professional life that I experienced in my first job. And returning to university, I had a 3,500-word essay to write about it. So this is a reflective essay, bringing me on to my second concept today of reflection. Reflection is a really interesting thing. Without it, we don't question why things are the way they are or how they could be different. There are actually many different approaches to the way you can work, but often we learn how to be at work early on in life. And then we get in our comfort zones, and change can be scary. So many professionals learn how to be at work early on in life, and then that defines them for the rest of their careers. They have a fixed mindset. This is the second scale I'd like to look at. In life, we can either have a perspective of a fixed mindset or one of active reflection. A fixed mindset has worked for older generations in the past. Having a separate work-life culture, keeping your personal and your professional life separate, has worked and been the norm for many generations. But I've come to believe that this has actually been to the detriment of our personal well-being and the health of the planet. By leaving our personal selves and our values at the door of the office, it's led to toxic work environments and short-term decision-making, favoring the benefits of the few. In truth, being just another cog in a big machine actually benefits nobody but the system, not even those supposedly pocketing the profits. Instead, there's a lot of evidence out there to suggest that we are all worse off in an unequal society and on a degrading planet. And this is getting harder and harder to ignore. We can continue to turn our heads the other way, but soon the consequences will be all around us. I'd argue they already are. So let's use the power of reflection to observe different approaches and consider which align with us. This way, we can pursue unique professional identities built upon our own fundamental human values, making way for more kindness and consideration and job satisfaction in the workplace. So I'd like to take a look at the full picture. Our goal here is to get out of the comfort zone into the growth zone, avoiding the fear along the way. And this should lead us to be values-led professionals, driving towards our own destinies. So how do you get from the passiveness of doing to being and taking the wheel of your own journeys? Well, for anyone here who has a 5-year plan, I suggest you scrap it. When was the last time setting fixed milestones and goals actually worked? When I was younger, about 15, I had a habit tracker to be healthier, to get up earlier, to scroll less, to read more, to do more exercise. But despite it only taking 12 days until I couldn't even keep up the habit of filling out the habit tracker, I still fall into this same trap of setting goals in this way today, often left feeling dissatisfied. Now, in our society, it is natural to desire self-improvement. Often we have an ideal version of ourselves in our head of who we want to be. But a friend put this point quite succinctly to me recently. Your thoughts are your reality. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, this isn't a self-love talk, but let me just say, you must recognize that doing certain behaviors isn't going to change how you feel about yourself. You will only develop with internal shifts in your mindset and sense of self. Shifts in who you are, not what you do. I first learned this reading Susan Jefferson's book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Instead of trying to change your behaviors at the moment of a decision making, it was about developing techniques to change and take control of your own lives. How not to get stuck in feelings or situations or routines that you don't want to be in. Now, I do realize that this is a lot harder than just saying you're going to do something and then it doesn't actually happen. But that's why it's also a lot more effective to learn new habits and to sustain them in the long run. I'd like to share an example of this. I read about Florence Williams. She once followed a narrative of non-stop busyness of urban hustle culture. And she decided to take control of her own agenda and understand why she was feeling stressed and overwhelmed to determine a new path. So let me take you back to the car. We've grabbed the wheel, what happens next? After we've potentially freaked out a little bit, our instincts kick in. We're guided by pre-programmed maps of how to live our lives. But we don't want to continue to follow these paths and blindly follow somebody else's agenda. This is where we have to shift our perspective from a fixed mindset to active reflection. So reflection allows us to take a look at those scripts and narratives pre-programmed in us. We can start to consider which we're following by design and which are by default. Scripts is a concept proposed by Stephen Covey. He suggests that we reactively follow these handed to us by teachers or parents or other people in our childhoods. But now we have developed self-awareness. We can choose which ones we subscribe to and which we want to change. I'd like to take back to the example of Florence Williams. When she realized that she wanted to stop feeling overwhelmed and stressed and take control of her life, she looked at those scripts that she had, uncritically subscribing to urban hustle culture, trying to balance the demands of her family life, her job, and the city. She realized this disconnect and decided it was time to step away from this narrative and embracing nature, revitalizing her well-being and her creativity. So whether it's a certain professional qualification, job title, salary, or lifestyle that you have in your mind, without reflecting on these career aspirations and understanding where they come from, it's easy to continue plowing ahead, smashing milestones and achieving goals, only to find yourself somewhere years down the line wondering, how did I get here? This is common in the workplace today. Dominant narratives tell us that success looks like big corporates, high salaries, and overworking. But what narrative does this serve? What benefits does this bring to you and your values? I for sure didn't feel the benefit of the script that I was following in my first job. I wasn't sure what the path I wanted to follow was yet, but I knew that working in a team where the sustainability representative had the nickname of Tree Killer didn't quite sit right to me. Coming back to my final year essay, I reflected long and hard. What was meaningful work to me? I thought back to this particular moment when I'd been in a workshop session and I'd been super engaged and I learned a lot. This was my encounter with social enterprises. I learned the concept of purpose-driven businesses and I got to work with one close to my personal interests. This lit a spark in me and has been a defining point in my career ever since, inspiring me to become president of an TEDxLancaster and consequently landing me my graduate role in sustainability. To now, very soon, starting a new role in environmental management. Hey, that's not that far off of a marine biologist, right? So, through consistent reflection, it can allow us to think about where we are and how we feel about that. Practicing the art of being, we can resist rushing into things and actually alter and pivot our trajectory with intention throughout our lives. So we're arrived in the growth zone. What do these benefits actually look like in practice, in day-to-day? I'd like to share with you a couple of examples. The first is of Charlie Brunel. He's the owner of Knepp Estate in West Sussex. For years, he struggled with unprofitable and intensive farming after taking on the farm from his grandparents. But after 17 years, he realized that it was time to explore a different path. And he pursued a pioneering rewilding project. Knepp Estate is now considered to be one of the most successful rewilding projects in UK and Europe, bringing nature back at an unprecedented rate. Not only has this brought a new lease of life for himself and his business, but it's also bringing hope to millions of other people around the world, seeing that this amazing work is being done. A second example is a little closer to home and is one of my best friends. Through daily journaling, she became more and more conscious that her consumer goods marketing job really wasn't aligned with her personal interests. She valued health, well-being, and spirituality. And her corporate culture couldn't be more different. So as she started to explore these interests, she took up yoga, doing art classes, trying vegan diet, and Buddhism. Until one day she expressed her interest in work and how she just wished she could do yoga every day. And her yoga classmate turned to her and said, "Well, why don't you learn to be a yoga instructor then?" Did she think, "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly do that. I couldn't leave this successful corporate career"? No. She thought, hell yeah, I could. She made a plan as to what this path could look like and then pursued it. For myself, as well as the benefits of following a career that I actually care about, learning how I work best in work also brings a lot of value to the workplace. If you leave me working on repetitive tasks for too long, alone, I get a bit lonely, uninterested, and enticed by 101 side quests. Instead, I work much better in a team and in a dynamic role. So, through self-connectedness, we can build professional identities and workplace cultures upon our own human fundamental values of integrity, kindness, courage, justice, and honesty for us all to thrive. So, think about who you are. What are your values and who do you want to be? And stick at it. Be proactive, speak up, and change paths when things aren't working out for you. Don't be complacent in the role that your profession plays in your happiness and in the culture of society that we have today, or even the climate crisis. By finding and following your passion for purpose, it doesn't just benefit you, but the society and environment too. In a world where we often follow other people's agendas, let's be a generation of change makers and take the wheel of our own journeys. Thank you.